everybody's heard about the bird. The bird, bird, bird. The bird's a winner when the bird, bird, bird. Bird is a winner when the bird, bird, bird. When the bird is a winner when the bird. All right, now we're talking about Vietnam. And I want you to look back real quick at some of the visuals here. You can see this guy's helmet. I think it says a lot about Vietnam, the Vietnam War in America. Was Vietnam a war? What was this? And you can see this guy on his side of his helmet. He's got March, April, May. He's got months written on his helmet, and he scratched them off. He's only got February left. And what he's doing is he's counting the months until he's served his 2 years, so he's out of there. That's how he views Vietnam in the war, is when do I get out of here? And then here's some protesting and gas smoke being shot into the crowds of protesters at a college that we're going to learn about later on. And you can see the National Guard is just shooting tear gas because there's so many protests against the war. And you can see to the top left is the Vietnam's flag, and there's Ho Chi Minh, who we'll talk about, who is the father of Vietnam. And we're going to find out why and how he fights with the Americans. So let's get a little bit of geography and background on Vietnam itself. Now, Vietnam is a small country. It's on the peninsula of the region of Southeast Asia. It's actually very similar to almost like a reverse California. It's all coast almost. It's got lots of coastland, and it's a very narrow strip of land, and it's kind of like a Eastern California, if you think about like in terms of the location. It is on the Asian Peninsula, but definitely hotter. It's tropical climate, and you can see this is a political map on the left that shows you the boundaries of countries, and this is a geographical map on topical map where you can see on the right where you see they're actually showing you again the political boundaries within the lands and the landscaping of Vietnam, which is this strip. You see Hanoi's to the north, and it's called Ho Chi Minh City in the south, are the two major cities. And Ho Chi Minh City originally was called Saigon, and we'll learn it changed after the war. So Vietnam is most populated country people in Vietnam and South Asia. It actually has over 90 million people today. Very populated. I don't know if you can tell what they're doing in the bottom. They're doing terracing, which is like they're cutting into the mountainside, and probably to grow rice. Rice is basically a grain that you grow, and it needs lots and lots of water. It's very labor intensive, lots of water. However, the reason that rice is such a popular staple food in the world, probably number one food in the world, is because you can grow more rice per square acre of land than anything else. It goes rice and then it moves to potatoes. So that's why we have a lot of rice and potatoes in people's diets. But they're also starches, and they're probably not the healthiest things. But brown rice is actually delicious. It has some nutrients in it. They actually take the husk off the rice. That's how you get white rice. And the reason we eat white rice is kind of interesting. It became popular by wealthy Asian people that started eating the white rice, whether they took the husks off because it was more expensive, and it made them feel like it looked clean and so forth. And the truth is that now we eat more white rice, especially in America and other countries, even though it has less nutrition, which is sad to say. We don't eat the nutritional part of the husk. But it is like the staple food of the world. Now, there's some other great important resources in Vietnam. If you guys remember World War II, Japan took over Vietnam, and that was really important to them because it has natural resources such as tin and oil. And oil is super important to the Japanese to build their military. And tin, again, to build machinery, tanks, and anything to battle with. So you want to think about how important that is. And as well as you see rubber trees are in Vietnam. So the Japanese took over Vietnam, and we're going to find out Ho Chi Minh was one of the rebels that actually led offensive attacks and fought against the Japanese imperialists who had taken over Vietnam. And then we'll see what happens later on. So it does have value, and it would be valuable to the French and the Americans who would later take control as well. So let's learn about the Vietnamese culture and the people. Now, the North has been heavily influenced and shaped by Chinese culture. The Chinese have ruled the North. They invaded North for thousands of years. So you understand that the Vietnamese people have an anti-imperialist point of view. When you've been invaded several times over thousands of years, when your neighbor to the north, the Chinese, take over. But when they took over, they did leave some of their culture, and we see things like Buddhism and symbolism, and the food itself tends to be more Chinese in the north. And then the French have took control and imperialized the South. And that's why you'll see, like, even in restaurants in St. Louis, if you have food from a southern Chinese restaurant, you'll see a lot of French influence, like almost like baguettes mixed with Vietnamese food, and banh mi song and so forth. And these foods you'll see, and that's where this Buddhism comes from. As Buddhism comes from the Chinese, but the French also brought Christianity. So the two major cities were Hanoi and Saigon in the south, and we saw that changes later in the future. We're going to get a little bit more in the history. And Vietnam has been controlled by other cultures for thousands of years. I mean, China has taken them over many of times. Now, at that time, they're dealing with the French. And then later, the Americans would come and be involved. And you could even see to the left is the dragon, a very important symbol to the Chinese. And to the bottom left, you can see there's a Buddhist temple. And there's even Hindus influences in Vietnam as well. The Chinese had controlled much of Vietnam up until the French took control under an imperialist want for Vietnam's natural resources. So French imperialism, much like British imperialism, the French are pretty ruthless, much more aggressive, I would argue, than the British. What they would do is they build all these railroad tracks. They go straight to the water, but they don't even connect with each other because everything's about getting all their resources like rubber, tin, and oil out of the country and sending it back to France. And the French would use military and force, brutal force against the Vietnamese that didn't fall in line, but they would also reward those that were loyal to the Vietnamese. Now, the British approach may be better on the argument that what they did, they expanded their empire faster and took more land than the French, because what they would do is they would actually use local leaders more as a puppet government. So they would let the king of Siam or something, for example, keep his power, at least on the surface, when they were really running things behind the scenes. Just like India would have some leaders, like even Mohandas Gandhi's father was, in fact, a governor, but how much power did those people really have? Well, the British had the power, but at least it gave the appearance, where the French were much more willing to fight. They were more willing to use force, and that probably was to their detriment. They probably lost out because of that. And we're going to find out what the Vietnamese do to them. So imperialism, again, is the action used by one nation to exercise political or economic control over smaller or weaker nations, such as the French over Vietnam or the British over Siam, which is now Thailand. Now, this guy comes along, and he leads a group called the Viet Minh. Viet Minh were a nationalist group, wanted the French out of Vietnam to be its own independent nation. Now, Ho Chi Minh's a really small guy. I think he was around 5 feet, even maybe a little shorter. But he had learned how to use guerrilla tactics that were actually, in a lot of ways, inspired by the United States, because during the American Revolution, we used guerrilla tactics to push the British out of the colonies. And he understood that using the landscape and the terrain to their advantage was how they could get the Japanese during World War II. And the Vietnamese soldier would wear very light clothing. They would not carry much food at all, like maybe some rice, a weapon, and bullets. And they were mobile, and they used tunnel systems to get around and hide in hilltops and jungle. It was really easy to attack and hide. And the French did not do well with the Viet Minh. The Viet Minh were the nationalists, and Ho Chi Minh really just wanted Vietnam to originally be its own country. He was truly a nationalist leader originally. We're going to find out a nationalist is a person that believes in the pride and independence and rule of a country by its people. And Ho Chi Minh's really interesting because people don't know this, but he actually wrote letters to the United States and to our president, and he asked for American support against the French, and just really asking to get the French out of there. And was talking about, he had went to school in France, and he really did like some of these ideas of democracy and was playing with these ideas of capitalism. He just wanted the French out of the country so they could have their own country and form a democracy. And that is not how things went. And the Americans ignored it, and they ignored him. So the result was, and then we got guerrilla warfare successfully drove the French out of Vietnam. Now, when the French left, and you could see what the guerrillas wear, hardly anything. They were light clothing, weapons, a helmet, something to cover them, but they're dressed so that they can get wet, and they're mobile in the jungle and the water. They understood the terrain, and that was their homeland. Huge advantage. Guerrillas are irregular troops who usually blend into the civilian population of innocent people and are hard to identify by regular armies. And it was very effective against the French. Now, when the French left, of course, their best friend at the time was the Americans, and we'll find out what happens next. So the French and the Vietnamese agreed to an accord, the Geneva Accord. And you can see this map here. There's this idea that, look, under the Geneva Accord, we're going to create what's called the 17th parallel. Does this sound familiar? Very similar to almost what happened with Korea. So the northern part was going to be under the Viet Minh, and we're going to find out that since the Americans ignored Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh, they had used the other world power at the time, which was the Russians. And the Chinese were communist as well at the time. So Ho Chi Minh leaned on the Chinese and the Russian communists for military support, money, and weapons, and they gave it to him. And then the North would be under French control, which the French were starting to leave, and they were done with the whole thing. But they would be able to establish a democracy, and they were going to vote for their leaders, and we'll find out what happens in the end. But what happens on the American side is where the French take off, the Americans pick up. So America's going to come in the South, and we want to make sure, again, that we don't let communism spread from northern Vietnam into the South. So there's this idea that we can't let, there they are, there's Mao Zedong, which is the communist leader of China, meeting with Ho Chi Minh, and they're talking. And this is during the height of the Cold War. And there's a strong fear that communism is going to spread. And we talked about containment policy. We got to contain communism where it is. And right now, under the Geneva Accord, it's in the north. We got to make sure southern Vietnam stays independent and as a democracy. And we're going to find out that the USSR, and the communist leaders are going to fight all they can to make sure that the North stays communist. But also, we're going to find out under the Geneva Accords, there was an agreement that there would be a national election for the leader. And we'll see how the Americans get involved and take over where the French stop.